I want to start by acknowledging all the communities out there and across my own constituency. There are very, very many. They're growing on a daily basis, who are really engaged and energised in direct action to fight to help repair and preserve the biodiversity in their neighbourhoods. It's great to see it. And I also want to thank Jane Stout and Michael O'Cinneide for their review and their work. It's an excellent piece of work and highlights well the problems and the systemic neglect of our National Park and Wildlife Service. But I also think of wider, deeper systemic problems with how we interact with and protect or fail to protect our natural systems and biodiversity. On the action plan, just an observation, Minister, that there is a huge disconnect between the scale of the crisis we face, the report on our chief agency with its responsibilities in this area, the action plan and its time frame. So, for example, the hiring of an international expert to benchmark the staffing levels, aside from whether we need one or not, when you look at the actions, it says we promise to appoint an international expert to benchmark staffing levels. Their findings will be reported in December. By June 2023, their plan will be approved, and by March 2024, their findings will have started to be implemented. So, by March 2024, all going well, we may see the beginning of the implementation of recommendations on staffing. And to be quite frank, the plan is peppered with that sort of corporate guff. Setting new directorates is another one, and an executive agency. Now, I understand these corporate and structural changes may be needed, but when you consider the scale of the crisis and the scale of the failures, this doesn't seem to match what we need. The scale of the crisis is something else, and I know you're aware of that, but to just quote from a source, 1 in 5 of all species assessed in Ireland are threatened with extinction. For bees and fish, it's at an alarming 30%. 63% of regularly occurring bird species in Ireland are of conservation concern. Those of most concern include the iconic species of corncrake, curlew, lapwing and barn owl, and now also widespread species like meadow pipit, snipe and kestrel. And I was struck some time ago by a statement from an IWT rep, Pádraig Fogarty, who told the Dáil Committee, and I quote, "A cloud of neglect and apathy has smothered the natural world. It is a terrible legacy that we are leaving for the next generation." So given this, I'm not sure that a cross-cutting standing committee with international benchmark staffing expert is what we need. And I want to welcome the recognition in the review of the dedication of the staff of the National Park and Wildlife Services, but I'm also struck by the neglect and the political apathy that the report records. There's been failure by successive governments to afford even minimal protection to supposedly protective sites and species, and there's something really wrong and breathtaking in this regard. I want to finish though by saying that although I think that proper funding of the agency and enforcement is really required and is a very welcome start, I don't think it's the full story. The biodiversity crisis fundamentally stems from our economic priorities, from an agricultural system driven by profit, big agri-food corporate interests, reliance on monocrops, the use of nitrogen fertilisers and the current cruelty inflicted on animals generally in the interest not of feeding people but of feeding profit margins. This is intrinsically linked with the climate crisis, and to be honest, both require a radical break from the economic system that is driving the loss of plants and animal species and throwing even our existence into doubt.